Well, let's get more now. We can speak to Rick De La Torre, who's a former CIA station chief for Venezuela. He joins us now from Washington. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Rick. You, of course, as I said in the introduction, served in Venezuela, and you're quoted as having described the US capture of Nicolás Maduro as, quote, one of the greatest military operations ever conducted. Do correct me if I'm misquoting you there. I'd just like to start by asking you, what went through your mind as you watched these very dramatic events unfolding in the early hours of Saturday?
And it made me wish I hadn't retired when I did, that I would have stuck around for another year or so instead of retiring. And you quoted me correctly. It truly is one of the most brilliant, successful operations, if not the most brilliant and most successful operation in the United States, or I'd even argue perhaps any military out there has ever conducted. I mean, think about it. We traveled thousands of miles. Within moments, decimated and destroyed all the Russian and Chinese surface-to-air missile systems and defense systems. Landed on this fortress of a house, and within moments had them in handcuffs back on the aircraft. And exited the area with no casualties on our side, and then within hours had them before a judge, a magistrate in the state of New York. That is something that no other government, no other military on this planet can actually do.
I mean, during your time in Caracas, I mean, did you ever see the day or imagine the day that Nicolás Maduro was removed from power and sort of physically extracted, as you've just described there, from Venezuela?
Well, there's no way for me to have predicted the events as they unfolded. But yeah, I mean, certainly, for sure. I mean, for years, I think we've been leading up to this event in one way or another. I'm kind of disappointed it really took this long. It took the will of this administration to actually carry out on the prosecution of this case, and to honor what our court systems here had already determined, that he needed to come before a judge and stand trial for leading a narco-terrorist organization. Make no doubt about it. He was never a legitimate leader of Venezuela. He just had this thin veneer of a state that allowed him to basically run a criminal enterprise where he and those within his immediate inner circle became billionaires. I mean, multi-millionaires, billionaires. In a way, on the backs of starving Venezuelans.
Right. So during your time in Caracas, I mean, presumably you were aware of this narco trafficking activity, and I just want to ask you, on what sort of a scale, and what did you actually see by way of evidence that was indeed directly linked to Nicolás Maduro?
I mean, not just me. I think anyone who was either in Venezuela or outside Venezuela, certainly in this hemisphere, was perfectly aware of his relationship with a number of gangs and Colombian terrorists that were living and being sheltered by him in Venezuela. Along that border with the country of Colombia, he took in hundreds and hundreds of Colombian dissidents, rebel groups, Marxist communist groups, and sheltered them, provided them the opportunity to work with his military and the folks closest to him, with the understanding that they would help in the logistics and manufacture and transportation of drugs, to not just North America, but also to Europe and elsewhere throughout the world. And from that, he would personally benefit. So that I mean, there was never any doubt about any of that, and I'm very, very confident that the evidence that will be put forth in his upcoming trial will show those direct links through testimony and through hard facts.
Right. So, Rick, just to clarify here, you would say that Venezuela under Nicolás Maduro was a narco state, and that he was the kingpin?
Oh, without a doubt. Between him, Diosdado Cabellos, Vladimiro Padrino, and others, this is exactly what they would do. They stole every possible resource they could, whether it was gold, whether it was human trafficking, the oil itself. All of that stuff was funneled through relatives and shell companies, and then funds moved overseas into bank accounts throughout Europe and excuse me, Eastern Europe and other places. So that's exactly that model that they ran.
Right, and some of the other places that you haven't mentioned, I mean, Iran, one of them, there are these reports, and I'd love to get your insights on this, that there were not just Iranian, but also Hezbollah operatives, Cuban operatives on the ground there in Venezuela. I mean, what sort of numbers are we talking at, and what were they involved in? What sort of activities?
Sure. So for a number of years, since actually the late 90s, he had a very open door, well, not even open door, red carpet treatment to Hezbollah, Hamas, in addition to the Russians, the Chinese, and the Iranian state itself, the MOIS and the IRGC, and he allowed all these folks to operate within his country with with impunity. It served, Venezuela was serving as an aircraft carrier where all these adversary forces were then spreading their chaos and destabilization to all the other neighboring countries. Now, he himself and his immediate inner circle, they were puppeted by the Cuban intelligence organization, by the Cuban government. The Cuban government's economy has been faltering for a number of years and is dependent on Venezuelan oil, which it gets for free in exchange for providing security and intelligence services. If you look at this attack, the 30 some odd bodyguards that died during the arrest operation on Nicolás Maduro and Celia Flores, all of them were from Cuba. Right. So right there, something that he had denied for so long, that there were no Cuban military or Cuban intelligence forces working within his country, was just proven right there to be a complete lie. The Cuban intelligence apparatus provided them some of the harshest Cold War Soviet Union type techniques so that he could keep his people in line, so that he could continue to run and manage that repressive regime. And in exchange for those services, they would flood Cuba with as much oil as the Cubans could take. And then what the Cuban government would do is they'd split that amongst themselves, most of it, and just leave a few crumbs behind for the Cuban people. So it is as illegitimate and as illicit as it could possibly get.
I mean, when you were in Caracas, I mean, were you aware of the presence of people that didn't look like they belonged down there? I mean, Iranian operatives, Hezbollah operatives. Did you see them? Were you aware of their activity? Did they have bases?
Well, look, I think if you find any major metropolitan city anywhere in the world, you're always going to find people of different colors and creeds and backgrounds, right? So that certainly wasn't that sort of concern, but it was just out in the open. There was nothing secret about this. If that's what you're asking, there were certainly Iranian cultural centers, which is everyone knows is nothing more than just a base for Iranian intelligence operations. The Chinese government was actively involved in expanding their Belt and Road initiative and having their debts paid for by receiving Venezuelan oil. And then the Russians themselves, the Russians military troops inside Venezuela, and the work that they were doing and helping to build up and sell weapon systems to the Venezuelans. So what I'm saying is none of this stuff was in any way hidden or disguised. He was very proud of his relationships with all these adversarial countries.
So just to sum up this part of the conversation, I mean, which countries do you think are going to feel the greatest sense of loss at the departure of Nicolás Maduro?
Well, I think most immediately it would definitely be Cuba. Cuba has been struggling for so long because of their failed economic policies and their inability to actually produce or manufacture anything that the world wants. They were completely reliant on Maduro and his regime to prop them up. Some of that oil now recently shifted to the very left-wing Morena party in Mexico. which is, for whatever reason, which is completely beyond me, believes and is ideologically aligned with the Cuban government. But that's being closed down too, because the Mexican people are realizing, well, why are we giving our natural resources away to a country that doesn't really benefit us, in any real way? This doesn't make any sense. So I think Cuba will probably be the one that will suffer the most regarding what we just recently witnessed within weeks or months.
Right, and as an extension of that question, I mean, clearly a lot of countries will be watching very nervously what's been happening in Venezuela and wondering, could we be next? I mean, which countries do you think could be on watch?
Well, I don't think it's about identifying specific countries or specific leaders and saying, hey, you're next. What we've had in this hemisphere, right, either rightly or wrongly, since 9/11, we've sort of turned our backs on our southern hemisphere, because we were pressed to deal with terrorism on a global scale elsewhere. What that did was that created a vacuum that allowed the Russians, the Chinese, Iranians, and others to fill and develop those relationships and start to play in our backyard. The message here is rather clear to to this hemisphere and its leaders is, look, certainly we welcome all parties, we welcome all types of leaderships, but there's a big difference between being the leader of a country and also cutting deals, being corrupt, and working with the enemies of the United States, and running a narco-terrorist state. On an annual basis, I'm not sure if folks understand the scale of damage drugs are happening in the United States, but we lose alone somewhere between 60 to 80,000 Americans every year on drug overdoses that come from Latin America. And there's not one family here in the United States that doesn't have a relative or know someone who has sadly had to struggle with either drug addiction or death. So and that transcends all politics, and that just immediately has to stop. And I think this administration has done that by securing our southern border and now prosecuting its campaign against drugs.
Just looking forwards to what happens next in Venezuela, and again, speaking to you is great because you know the structure of the country and the governance of the country. I mean, clearly toppling the leader, as we know from previous case studies, is in many ways the easy part. In terms of how Venezuela is governed next, I mean, it looks like quite a lot of remnants from the previous administration are going to be there, at least for the time being, not least the vice president, now acting president. I mean, where do you see things heading to?
Well, I'd only point out, we're talking it's been 72
4 or 5 days,
hours or so, right? So whenever you conduct these operations, right? And I think the number one thing that we need to focus on is stability and safety for the poor Venezuelan people that aren't involved in the Maduro regime. And what that means is, once you remove him, right, you need to fill that vacuum with something. And of course, nothing would be better than members of the Venezuelan exiled community, the opposition parties. But the challenge there is that they are exiled. They're in foreign countries. They're not in Venezuela, right? And so someone has to be there the next day to make sure that the water is running and that the power is on and that things continue as best as they can for the citizens, for the citizenry. So what that means is that we just have to pinch our nose for the time being and have to deal with some of its remnants until we've got a better handle of this situation. And I think that's what we're seeing now. I suspect in the short term, there'll be some sort of delegation or groups from the United States heading down there to help provide some further guidance and leadership on how to continue to roll these things out. But make no mistake about it, Venezuela is in a much better position today than it was on Friday.
Right, and just lastly, I mean, I'm sure you've still got contacts and friends on the ground in Venezuela. I'd just like to ask you what they're saying. I mean, is there a sense of nervousness, or is there a sense of confidence that now Maduro is out of the way, the country is, as you say, on the path to something markedly better?
Yeah, I do, and my friends that I have spoken with in Venezuela and those in the exile community, there's one constant theme, and that is relief. Relief, because in their minds they couldn't see it get any worse. So they say, look, anything is better than what we had before, because we were starving, right? We didn't have enough food to eat. We had no future. There were no jobs. There was nothing, right? The only thing you did was serve the regime or betray your own values and your own belief systems and become a member of the criminal enterprise, right? So it's a real testament to the Venezuelan people that have put up with this for so long.
Okay, well, we really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us and sharing your insights with us. Rick De La Torre, former CIA station chief for Venezuela. Thank you very much indeed, sir.